Hello, my name is Ed. This is going to be another Tag Team Opinion Spot, a series of videos that I'm doing with my buddy Phil from Detroit. This time we're going to try to take a little look at, art versus commerce in, the comics business, and we're actually more looking towards the idea of overexposed characters or oversaturating the market with certain titles. Just to state the obvious, Marvel, DC, and, the independent companies, these places are businesses, you know what I mean? They're there to make money, they're there to make a profit, it's not, doing comic books for charity. It's not, people in their garret with their little beret on, suffering for their art and making arts for art's sake. It's a business, There are popular characters out there that people love. The company puts them out. The company owns these characters. They have every, right to use them however they see fit, And there's nothing wrong with that, that's great, because certain these characters belong to a business as opposed to an individual, and there's been weird things that's happened, throughout the history of comics where certain people have gotten ripped off and this, that, and the other thing. But, but because these were kind of corporate, characters, generations, have, been able to be exposed to them, and God willing, in the future, people will be able to still be exposed to, Batman and Spider-Man and Superman and the X-Men and all those characters after all of us are gone. So that's one thing. There's nothing wrong with, companies making a profit or making a business, making business decisions that they think are going to benefit them. I mean, that's totally great. I think it gets kind of weird where sometimes you get into a point where sometimes decisions are being made, and obviously I don't know, or I don't get to go to these staff meetings or I don't get the internal memos or anything like that, but it just seems certain decisions are being made, by somebody, behind the scenes in accounting or whatever, who doesn't know anything about, the entertainment side of the business or whatever. They're looking at their spreadsheets or their fourth quarter reports or whatever, and they're seeing things like, well, that Death of Johnny Storm comic book came out and it was a big hit. It was in a poly bag. If we want more successful comics, we should put them all in poly bags. You know what I mean? But yeah, I mean, there's always been, characters that are really popular, so they got spin-off comics, there are spin-off characters, You start off with Superman in action, then he's a star of Superman comics, then he's Superboy, then you get Supergirl, then you get, Superdog, then you get Superman's pal, then you get Superman's girlfriend. And that's always been with us, and it'll always, probably continue to be with us. I think the problem for me as a fan, as a consumer is that fine line you have to walk between, being a fan of like Wolverine or Deadpool or whatever, and, going to either the company's website or going into the local comic book store and seeing, okay, here's a Wolverine comic. Okay, it's really great. It's fun. It's got great art in it and really cool stories. And then so it's popular, so they do another one. So, Wolverine's in 2 comics or whatever. Okay, great. Right. Fine. Then, it's still popular, so they come out with something else. And then it goes from, wow, Wolverine's great. He's really popular. He's really cool. And then there's a line that sometimes get crossed where you're like, oh man, this guy again? What, another Wolverine comic? We just got through with the last big Wolverine summer event, Why are they bringing back another Wolverine comic? Why don't they bring back somebody obscure? Why don't they bring back Werewolf by Night? Or whatever, you know what I mean? I'm not saying that to criticize Wolverine. I like Wolverine, but, I understand that feeling is out there, and that comes from not so much the company or somebody in the business staff, giving the people what they want. That happens because, they like Phil said, they try to milk it, you know. If we can get $1 out of a Deadpool fan, maybe we can get $2 out of them. If we can get $2 out of them, maybe we can get $3 out of them. If we can get 3, maybe we can get 4, you know. And the problem is, you know, a lot of times they'll just flood the market at once. I mean, certain things just kind of grew organically. I remember when I was a kid, you know, we had Amazing Spider-Man, and then we had Spectacular Spider-Man. Actually, I think it went Amazing, then it was Marvel Team Up. Then you got Spectacular Spider-Man, and then, you know, that kind of grew, and then you started getting stuff like Web of and you know, all these other comics. But these days, if there's one character that, you know, the audience seems to show the little bit of interest in, you know, some of these companies just dump it all out there at once, you know. And it's not like how in the old days where you start off with Captain Miracle, then you get, okay, that's popular, so then you get Captain Miracle Adventures, okay. So then the next comic book is Captain Miracle Girl, then Captain Miracle Boy Jr., then maybe the Miracle Squad, and then maybe you get one-shot Miracle Dog, you know what I mean? These days, you'll get Captain Miracle, then Captain Miracle Adventures, then Captain Miracle by Night, Captain Miracle Edge, Captain Miracle Quarterly, Captain Miracle Dark, you know? You know, once again, you know, companies have every right to put that sort of thing out, but I think it hastens, you know, reader burnout, you know, reader fatigue, you know. Like I said, you go in there and here's another blessed Captain Miracle comic, you know, and some people will adjust themselves. You know, there's 5 Captain Miracle comics, you know, they'll limit themselves to 3, but there's other people that are like, well, since I can't afford to get 5 or 6 Captain Miracle comics, I'm not going to get any of them, you know, and they'll either spend that money on a different comic book, or, you know, they might just, you know, not buy comics, you know. They might say, well, hey, I've saved myself, like, you know, damn near $20. You know, I can go on a date. Well, you can't go on a real date with that, but that's 2 movie tickets, though. You know what I mean? So, you know, I think the thing to do, well, I don't know if there's anything you can really do. I think the management at these companies really seek to look at why certain comic books are popular and why people like certain characters, and, you know, if they spin these characters off or whatever, you know, do so for the right reasons. You know, it's just the same thing what we used to get back in the 90s, you know. Phil brought up the whole idea of the foil covers and whatnot. I think, unfortunately, you know, people lost sight of the fact that people were buying the comics because they liked the art and they liked the story, they liked the characters. All of a sudden, the whole selling point was the foil covers, the die-cut covers, the plastic bags and things like that. And I think, unfortunately, we're starting to get to that point right now again, you know. Another thing that bothers me with the whole thing of overexposing certain characters or certain titles, you know, you start to lose sight about what that character is about, you know. And it's not just a case of, I'm over the fact that, okay, Wolverine's on all the X-Men teams and somehow he's on 2 Avengers teams at the same time, him along with Spider-Man. I'm not really so sure whether this actually goes to the point I'm about to make. I'm not sure how that makes any sense. Okay, I understand why you would want to have to be on this X-Men team, which is a little bit different than this other X-Men team, and then why you would want to be on maybe the Avengers. But why are you on 2 Avengers teams? Of course, the real reason he and Spidey are on 2 Avengers teams don't have anything to do with, saving the world or getting a sort of philosophy out there about justice or anything like that. It has to do with the fact that, it's just a sales thing, and fine, whatever. But like I said, now you start to lose what's special about Spidey, what's special about Wolverine, and when you have so many comics with these limited number of characters, you have more and more people writing them. Some people don't have the right feel for the character. Some people don't know the character's history. Then all of a sudden you have comics coming out concurrently that contradict each other, and not just in the sort of continuity thing of, you know, how can he be here when he should be over there, or the idea of maybe somebody, you know, forgot about some event that happened in some other story 10 years ago. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about where the character will act in ways that the character doesn't normally act because, like I said, this particular writer doesn't really understand the character or doesn't really get it, or, you know what I mean? Where someone will put a line in some comic book about, you know, Wolverine will be like, oh, I really love this chocolate milk or something like that. And then next month over here in the Avengers, he'll say something like, no milk for me. I'm lactose intolerant or whatever. And stuff like that happens because, you know, like I said, people, you know, they're trying to put too many comic books out with this one character just because he's popular. You know, I'm just picking out Wolverine because, you know, that's just a character that, you know, that's one of the many characters that people say are like overexposed, you know. Like I said, I'm not picking on Wolverine. I like Wolverine, you know, but, you know, you can say the same thing about, you know, Deadpool. You can say the same thing about Batman, definitely, you know what I mean? And sometimes, like I said, there's that line I think you have to toe between giving people what they want and then giving them too much to the point where they're sick of it, you know. I guess that's pretty much the main points I wanted to make. Like I said, I don't have any delusions about comic book companies. You know, if you're an artist, you're a writer, you know, you get in there because, you know, you love the medium, you know, but you also want to, you know, you hone your craft and everything. You get as well as you can get, or you get as good as you can get and tell the best type of stories you can tell. But you also want to be compensated for it. If you're a stockholder in these companies, hey, you expect these companies to turn a profit, and let's face it, you know what I mean? It's not even just that it's DC Comics. I mean, DC, you know, DC has got to answer to Time Warner AOL. You know, Marvel's got to answer to, you know, Disney. You know, these are multinational corporations, you know, and, you know, they may give money away to charity, but, you know, they expect Superman and Batman, the X-Men, that ain't charity. They expect those properties to make money for them. So, you know, so I see that side of it as well. Okay, I guess that's it. Thank you very much. You know, please let us know your opinions. Leave a comment down there. Leave a comment on Phil's video. You know, thanks, and you guys have a good one.